Summer is in full swing, particularly today in Melbourne and Adelaide, and there are some of us who don't get much of a holiday, and it's especially true for snake catchers around the north of the country. On the Sunshine Coast in Queensland, where urban development is increasing, there's been a rise in the number of professional snake catchers.
All right, guys, so we just arrived here at a home in Budgerum at the top of the hill, and we've got an absolute whopper of a carpet python now. We came out and got a little look, and all I could see at the start was his tail, but he's moved out into the open now, and it is a really big snake. And not only that, it looks like he's eaten, at the very least, a very large brush-tailed possum.
That's Lockie Gilding. He's a snake catcher on the Sunshine Coast, and I had a chat with him earlier.
Good morning. How you going?
Very well, thank you. Look, I haven't seen a snake inside a house that I've lived in for some time, but I did have one experience with a carpet snake, and it was utterly terrifying. It was in the summertime. Is summertime the peak season for snake catchers like yourself?
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll see in the cooler months, we see quite a substantial drop-off in snake numbers. Now, you do see them throughout the entire year, whether it's cold or not. If you have a couple of warm days in the middle of winter, you'll still see snakes out basking and doing their thing. But definitely these warmer months are when we're at our busiest.
My parents, and I think a lot of us, a lot of our parents' generation, would say that, in their childhood, it was, the responsibility of the householder to deal with any snakes that wandered onto their property. And the way that they would deal with those snakes is generally with the sharp end of a shovel. Is that changing now? Do people not do that as much?
Look, I think so, especially in this kind of area. I mean, if you go out west into, more rural areas, it's absolutely still the way. I feel they don't have snake catchers there that can get out there as fast as what we have here on the coast. So anywhere up and down the east coast, I feel like that's really starting to change now. People have 24/7 access to a snake catcher, typically 10 to 15 minutes away from their house. So why would you put yourself at risk at the end of the day? You might as well call somebody out to do it for you.
So how does it work? Are you on call, or do you just sort of, around this Christmas season, are you, at a barbecue and then you get a call and you just jump in the car and drive off and catch a snake? How does it work usually?
Unfortunately so. We're on call 24/7. So, any time of the day or night, any day of the year, we get a call, then we're on our way typically. So, we've got catchers all over the Sunshine Coast. And yeah, Christmas Day, it's the snakes don't know it's Christmas Day. They still move, so we still have to be on call.
In the area you cover around sort of southern Queensland, what sort of snakes do you usually find when you're called out?
For the most part, it's harmless species like your carpet pythons, your green tree snakes, your brown tree snakes, keelbacks, things like this. But on the odd occasion, we also get eastern brown snakes, red belly black snakes, and quite a large diversity of smaller venomous snakes that, ranging anywhere from mildly venomous to potentially dangerous. But the really interesting ones are always the brown snakes for us.
What are you usually walking into in terms of the drama of the situation when you get there?
I think drama's a pretty good word for it. It's on a scale the same as anything, but we come into a lot of crying. Crying is very typical. We usually get that straight over the phone. You can kind of judge the situation before you even get to the house by just listening to their voices. So, some people that are deathly terrified of snakes, you can imagine how they'd be reacting if they got a snake in their house or a snake in their bed. So we go out to some pretty interesting situations, and it's pretty priceless.
How dangerous are snakes around your part of the world in terms of actual statistics of people being bitten, people being having serious injuries or being killed? Is it common anymore around Queensland?
Not at all. Anywhere around Queensland, anywhere around Australia. On average, in Australia, we have 2 to 3 snakebite deaths per year, which is, if you look at that on a scale, with regards to other things, dogs, bees, ants, these kind of things, it's not dangerous at all. We get a lot of snake bites throughout Australia, don't get me wrong, but our hospital care is second to none. So on the Sunshine Coast or anywhere else in Australia, our hospital care is really good. We've got great anti-venom, so really if you're bitten by a snake and you treat it the correct way, then you're not going to have too much to worry about. Don't get me wrong, it's going to be a horrible experience if it is something, quite highly venomous. But if you get yourself to hospital and you do the correct first aid, then yeah, you shouldn't have too much to worry about.
How many times have you been bitten, Lockie?
Too many to count. Nothing by venomous, but pythons give you a nibble quite often, and it's not really something to worry
Very cute way
about.
of talking about it, Lockie. And
yeah,
nibble.
I mean,
A nibble from a snake.
Well, typically, look, it's usually
budgies or puppies give you a nibble. A snake gives you a bite. In my opinion.
Well, look, typically it's the young ones. So your adult carpet pythons, they are quite calm and relaxed. Once they get to a certain size, they're fairly confident. So if you're gentle with them, typically they're the exact same way with you. Now, we get ourselves into all different positions trying to relocate snakes. So as you can imagine, we're crawling up in roof spaces where we can't stand up. We're on our belly and we're just reaching forward blindly to try and pull a python out of a roof. So every now and again, you're going to cop a bite. Typically, it's the young animals that are really defensive. They're quite small, so they still have a lot of predators. So anything that's grabbing a hold of them, they're going to be worried about. Whereas your larger animals, they're a little bit more relaxed. They get to a certain size, they start to feel a little bit more confident. And like I said, you're gentle with them. Typically, they're the same way with you.
You've turned to social media to show people your work, picking up snakes, talking about various snakes. Why have you decided to do that?
Look, I think it's a great platform. As I said, we're really starting to move out of that any good snake's a dead snake. And a lot of that is due to social media, in my belief. We have over 50,000 people that are following the page. So it's a pretty large audience here on the coast. So if we can show people that, look, snakes aren't what you think they are, and, this is how to live safely around these animals, then, it's getting out to a much wider range of people than it would be without social media. Before that, you're talking to your friends and you're talking to people that you go out to move a snake on, you talk to the family and you can give them as much information as possible, but that only goes so far. Now, if you've got social media and you've got 50,000 people that you can tell the same thing to, it's going to go a lot further. So hopefully a lot of those people are taking it on board and really learning something and getting something from the experience.
You've done a bit of overseas travel to study snakes. Where have you been and what have you found?
We've been to a lot of countries now. A lot through Southeast Asia. That's usually where we spend most of our time. Southern Africa, Bangladesh. Yeah, so most of what we do has been in Southeast Asia. It's the easiest place for us. It's so close, and it's almost cheaper to get over to Southeast Asia than it is to get over to Western Australia sometimes. So that's where we spent most of our time. But
how different are the snakes in Southeast Asia to the ones that you encounter at home?
There's a pretty stark difference in most cases. So the snakes that we get here are mostly from a couple of families. Now, our venomous snakes are lapids. They're front fixed fang venomous snakes, whereas if you go over to places like Southeast Asia, they have what we call pit vipers. And now pit vipers have much longer fangs, and they don't act like our snakes. They spend, the vast majority of their pit vipers in Southeast Asia will actually sit in trees, in ambush, and are perfectly camouflaged. So, look, finding them's a completely different story than looking for a snake here in Australia. Here in Australia, you're spending most time looking on the ground, whereas over in Southeast Asia, you're looking for little vipers sitting up in trees. So, yeah, it's a pretty stark difference over there to what it is here.
Okay. Lockie, enjoy the summer season. I hope you don't get too many nibbles. Thank you. Thanks very much for joining us on RM Breakfast.
Not a drama at all. Thanks for having me.
That's Lockie Gilding. He's the co-owner of Sunshine Coast Snake Catchers 24/7.